Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the GallowgateShots YouTube channel and podcast. We are back for another match reaction. I am your host today, Kris, joined by the fantastic Joe.
Oh, thanks, mate.
It's another one, Joe.
It's another one. Yeah, it's another one. Oh dear. Where do we start?
I just want to start by telling people, I know I say this every week after a defeat, but we're all going to try and keep this as minimal as possible. But just how much we celebrate the victories, I think it's important that we then go and discuss the defeats as well, and especially the ones in the manner that what we've just suffered to Brighton as well. Let's get straight into it, Joe. So, starting lineup, there's one forced change by Eddie Howe, which was obviously Botman is injured, and Target comes straight in, which we kind of had a thought behind it, where Dan Burn would just naturally shift into that centre back position, and Target will come on to the left. There was a late fitness test for Joe Linton as well. As we already know, he made that starting 11, which we're going to discuss in a little bit as well. So let's get straight into kickoff. Newcastle started well.
We did start well. We had, I think, about two really good chances with Isak, who, for the most part, feed on scraps for a lot of the game. But I think, when I first saw them, I honestly thought Isak probably could have done better. There was one chance where he was slipped right down the middle. I think one of their centre backs miscontrolled it, and he was able to go right into the box. And there was a defender that was closing him down, but I did think that there was just that moment where he could have pulled the trigger a little bit early, but he decided to take an extra touch or two, and the angle got away from him. It was good defending, don't get me wrong, but it was. I still felt that Isak could have done a bit better, and if he had the chance again, he probably would have taken it a bit earlier. Miggy as well. Miggy had a really good game for. In comparison to the whole team, I thought his running and his drives were really good, especially the first sort of 10-15 minutes, and he was one of the few bright sparks. I think he worked well with Tonali down that sort of right hand side, and carved open a few chances. So I thought we started the game well, and I thought to myself, okay, here we go, back to normal, back to what we do best. This is going to be similar to the Villa game, and it wasn't quite the case, was it?
Yeah, so I would say there was a chunk of the game, I would probably say between 10th and 20th minute. It was only a 10-minute spell where it was back and forwards, just back and forwards between the two teams. And you're thinking, this is panning out to be quite a decent game for a neutral, really. But straight after that, it just seemed that Newcastle just lost the game in midfield. It's just as if the midfield just all of a sudden just switched off and went, we're not here anymore.
Yeah, I mean, there has been some grumbles about whether the likes of Bruno and Tonali can play together as one, but you think, you know what, okay, we'll give them a bit of a chance to gel together. But the midfield did seem pretty non-existent in this game, and I was disappointed because that is, ultimately that is what's going to drive our attacks, especially going down the wings. You got the likes of, last season Bruno worked so well with Trippier and Miggy, and same with Longstaff as well when he came in. There was that triangle that we just didn't see at all, and it was, like I say, it was disappointing. It feels almost like Tonali and Bruno are trying to play the same game, but
we mentioned this a couple of times, haven't we, so far?
Yeah, and Joe Linton wasn't able to exert his physical presence in the stuff that he does best. There was only one opportunity where he was able to sort of dribble in the box, but then it was a poor finish. Under pressure, mind you, but still. The midfield was almost non-existent. There were so many times where Trippier would get the ball, probably like Matoma, and maybe Ferguson or whoever it would be would close him down. He'd pretty much like panic and then just dink it out into the midfield, and someone like Gilmore or March would just pick it up and then drive and start attack. And it felt like we couldn't get outside our own third a lot of the time, and we didn't know how to play those triangles that we're so used to.
Yeah, so I think you've hit the nail on the head there, mate. There's so many times in that game where there was just zero options, and that was just not midfield as well. That, like you've highlighted Trippier a couple of times, and I'm do you know what it is? I'm not defending Trippier because that was a very poor game from Trippier. I think every time he tried to pass the ball, it just went into a pocket of nowhere, absolutely nothing. I think it was disappointing from Trippier. He wasn't the only one. We'll get onto it. But there was a couple of times where the likes of our defenders have the ball and there's just zero movement whatsoever, absolutely nothing. Where you can see the lads trying to encourage them, saying, "You're going to have to do something because we're literally." But the way Brighton set up, and do you know what it is? We're not taking anything away from Brighton because Brighton were fantastic.
Brighton were class. Brighton were absolutely
really
phenomenal.
Good. And we were mentioning in the WhatsApp group, Joe, and Brighton looked very similar to how we started last season. That intensity was just non-stop throughout the game, even when they were 3-0 up at this point, and they're still going at it when our defenders are pissing about with the ball at the back. But like you've mentioned, we just really struggled to get a hold of the game in midfield, and it just seemed like even when we attempted it, it was so slow. There was nothing there. There was no for what Eddie Howe says intensity is our identity. You would not have thought so in that game.
It was really sloppy. It was really sloppy, and it felt like, I mean, you've just said it felt like there were no avenues to go down. I mean, there were times where Tonali did really well, especially in the first half, where he was able to carve out a few things. But I think Estupinian, he really struggled actually in the first sort of 10, 15 minutes. He was giving the ball away, similar to how Trippier was doing later in the game, and that pressing was working really well. And I mean, Isak, God bless him, he had to feed on scraps for most of that game. Really well, mind. There were times where he was able to get the ball from deep and drive forward, but you got to feed Isak into better positions and to give him some support as well. There was actually a moment where Isak did, I think it was Isak, he did really well and he squared it back along the box, but Gordon had just ran a little bit too early. Yeah. But then I was thinking to myself, right, where's Tonali? Where's Joe Linton? Who's there to support that ball? And then when the camera just sort of panned and the ball was rolling, one of their players just picked up and went away. And I thought, where the hell is everyone?
Joe, there was about 3 of their players waiting to pick the ball up. I think that moment sums up how our midfield played because, like you said, at least one of those midfielders should be busting the gut to get just on the edge of the box, just because you never know what happens in those sort of situations. And they were not even close. Not even close. Barely
I think Tonali was still on the half. Yeah, literally. Yeah, I think Tonali was still on the halfway line by the time they continued their attack. And you're thinking, it was weird because Tonali actually was playing really advanced quite early in the game as well. So why
to the right hand side, wasn't
it? Yeah. So why do anything different now? Yeah, I was disappointed. It was almost like they didn't have the belief that if they went forward, they were going to score, and I find that very baffling.
It seemed like Fiera, the counter attack. That's what that.
Yeah, certainly.
Like, as if no way going to camp here just in case.
Yeah, I mean, tell you what, March and Matoma, they are 2 incredible players. Whilst I thought that Target had done well a few times with March, I think he had his number quite a few times. March on target, I thought. Although I will say that for the first half, in spite of the fact they had 70% possession, we did keep their chances to a minimum. And they only managed to score. Well, I say they only managed to score. Their pressure got them the goal, but it was a bit unfortunate to concede.
We'll get on to the first goal. Okay, so this has caused quite a few stirs in our WhatsApp.
Oh, Mr. Spaghetti Legs. Oh dear.
There was a few back and forths in our WhatsApp group alone. I'm guessing it was probably the same in many other Newcastle fans groups as well. What's Nick Pope doing, Joe? What is he doing?
Why is every time he leaves the box, he just completely decks it and he turns to spaghetti. He doesn't know what to do. I mean, he did it a few times last season with the sweeper keeper role. I'm not going to mention a certain game where it backfired horribly, but he's done it almost every single game this season. And I don't know if that's something that's been instructed for him to do a bit more to try and bring himself into play more and help the defenders out a bit. But he really looks so uncomfortable when he gets out on the ball. I feel like he doesn't judge the bounce very well as well. Like, it'll come down to him and he'll bounce up and he'll be like, oh God, like, what have I got to do? Head the ball out of play.
It's very robotic, isn't it? When he gets out, it's very robotic.
Yeah, and to be fair, look, keepers of old, that is what they were all like. That's not anything new. But when you look at elite keepers nowadays, like Edison, Allison, etc., the ones who are really good with the ball at their feet and you feel comfortable with them in any situation. I think that is, to be that kind of sweeper keeper role, you almost need to be at that level of footwork, and Nick Pope obviously isn't that. Now, what he could have done, and I haven't said all that, he could have just squared it to Trippier and it would have been
screaming for it. Trippier's
That's all he
asking
could
for
have
the
done.
ball.
Yeah, we're not asking him to do a Maradona, take on 4 people and score like on pro clubs. Like all we're asking him to do is just pass the ball to Trippier and then get back in net. But he decides to try and cane it. Doesn't connect properly. It skids along, and I can't remember off the top of my head. I think is it Matoma who it goes to straight
Possibly,
away, or
it drops in that little pocket on the left-hand side, so
Stupinian.
possibly.
It was one of
Oh,
their
no.
players on the left-hand side.
Yeah.
And no, it was Stupinian, I think. And yeah, the drive forward. Yeah, Stupinian plays like a little 1-2 or something with Matoma. Matoma comes along, and yeah, there's a save initially, but yeah,
which is a good save. It's a good save. It's a forced one by himself.
Yeah, although actually, yeah, we'll say. Should we talk about Tonali's attempted clearance as well?
Well, that comes after the first save, doesn't it?
Yes, I'm trying. Yeah, so it comes in. There's a save. It comes out. Tonali has a half-hearted kick.
Kick at it.
Which I hate those kind of things where you just sort of swing your leg at it knowing you're not really going to get a connection.
Yeah.
And the fact that he then sort of stood there and didn't press forward, knowing, seeing that there was a player coming along. I think it was Gilmore who had
Gilmore that smashes it.
Absolutely smashes it in. At that point, Pope has nothing more he can do except just
stop it from hitting the net. Yeah.
Yeah, he's not going to catch that. If he's really lucky, he might get a hand to it and deflect it away. But at that point, it's coming at him with such force, such ferocity. There's nothing you can do. And then obviously Evan Ferguson's just waiting like a brilliant poacher and hits in the back of the net. And you have to think, yeah, okay, in isolation, stop your goal to concede. But that was their pressing, that was their intensity, that was them carving out multiple chances. I mean, to have 3 shots in the space of like 10 seconds. Like, come on, you can't be allowing that.
Yeah, exactly. So the game went on because that was 25th, between 25th and 30th minute, right thereabouts, somewhere in between there. The game went on, and do you know what it is? As the game went on, I was still thinking we've got a goal in us here. We can get back into it. Obviously, half time comes, and still the same thought process. We'll get out of this one. The next goal is crucial. The next goal after half time is unbelievably crucial. Unfortunately for us, it goes the other way, and it's a 25-yard strike from Ferguson.
Yeah,
it's a beautiful strike, but we should be doing better in every aspect. He shouldn't be able to get the shot away. First of all, the centre back should be at least closing the angles of the shot down, and Nick Pope is so far on his right-hand side of the goal as well. They might as well just had an arrow pointing at where to hit that ball, because if you're hitting that on target, it's going in every single time, because no way Nick Pope can get across there.
Yeah, no, absolutely. If you watch the replay, there's a certain angle from behind Ferguson where Byrne just sort of steps back almost, and even like parts, like any other 2-3 steps to allow him that angle to get in. And I'm not saying it's purely Dan Byrne's fault, but him and Cher really should have pressed forward and not allowed that gap to come up, because it's inviting it. It's literally inviting him to take the shot. I know that Byrne had another player that was next to him, but at the end of the day, you can't be allowing these players that opportunity to strike within 25 yards. It's a gorgeous strike. But you should expect that a Premier League striker can deliver those kind of finishes, and you need to anticipate that. And again, it's a lack of pressing. I mean, you could also argue where was the midfield in that as well to help out the defense. It was such a strange game, because we're dissecting all these things, and it feels like the absolute antithesis of what an Eddie Howe side is so good at.
Yeah,
and it's weird because we know these players can do better, but they just didn't today. It just felt like from the off. I mean, I'll tell you what, actually, start the second half. I actually did think we started all right. I thought we came out and played quite well. We seemed to be stringing passes together. There were 1 or 2 half chances created, and Isak was running well, Gordon was running well, but then it kind of just went back to how it was. And it just felt like we were just accepting the fact that Brighton were going to play their game, and we had nothing to stop it. It almost felt like we were just conceding that from the off, and it felt quite sad, because I thought, well, that's not what wins us games as a team, as what we are.
So obviously we'll go 2-0 down, and just 5 minutes later, the worst case scenario, we're 3-0 down, and it's a very lucky goal, because yes, it's another deflection. We seem to concede a lot of deflected goals End of last season, we picked up a few. And
Yeah,
this season,
we did actually. Yeah,
it's another one this season. And Fabian Shaw, it's a lazy effort, Joe, isn't it? Unbelievably lazy to try and stop that ball.
Half sticks his leg out, doesn't he? It's
all that it is. Dangles his leg out.
Yeah, but why? Like why? Stick your leg in, like properly. Get a good tackle and stand your ground. I think as a Premier League defender, you should know that if you're gonna lazily stick a leg out, it actually can potentially make it harder for a keeper to save it, as we saw, because it's probably still going to go on target or at least very close, and you're just making the angle, the trajectory so much more difficult for Pope. And Fabian Schär, being an experienced defender that he is, and a fantastic defender that he is, he should know better. But at that point, I mean, I looked at his reaction in the replay, and it just felt like he was like, oh, okay, fine, another one. It almost felt like at that point, it was like, okay, yeah, game over. And that's not what you want to see. But again, it's down to Brighton's pressing. It was just the same thing all game. And at that point, I thought to myself, like, why bother keep watching?
There was still 20 minutes of the game left at this point.
Minutes left to play. At that point, I kind of mentally switched off, to be honest. I was sat there going, they're going to sit the game. We're going to just allow them to play the ball. And that's exactly what happened. But the 10, 15 minutes after that, they literally just passed it around them, carved out a couple of small half chances, and we were just sat there happy to, well, not happy, but content to allow them to do that and concede that we weren't going to get back into this game.
A few changes were made during the game, obviously. So Tonali went off. Let's talk through it. So Miggy went off, Tonali went off, and who was the other one? Was somebody else?
Almiron went off.
Can't remember exactly who it was, but there was a fair few.
Miggy went off for Wilson.
Yeah,
I think. Tonali went off.
Tonali went off for Longstaff. And was Joe Linton the other one?
Anderson came on.
So hang on. So it was Wilson came on for Joe Linton. Anderson came on for Almiron. Longstaff came on for Tonali, and that was all in the 58th minute. Okay, so that was just before we conceded the second goal. Once again, it's few changes that made them concede a goal straight away, very similar to what we saw against Liverpool. Do we have an issue with these substitutions?
Well, the argument last week was that it disrupted the flow of the game and it meant that we couldn't continue what we were doing. But this time around, it wasn't working from the off. At least with Liverpool, what we were doing before the substitutions was really positive, and we actually had a control in the game. This time around, it was the complete opposite almost, but it didn't really have an effect. I thought it made sense to do these substitutions this time around. I think if you're 1-0 down and you're about to concede a second, then you need to perform some brave changes. So I don't actually have any problem with Eddie Howe doing that, because up until that point, like I say, I didn't see us getting back into the game. We needed to change something. We can talk about the fact that Tonali can't play more than 60 minutes at the minute, though. That is
he not though? Or is that Eddie Howe's decision?
Well, no, it's Eddie Howe's decision, but I'm just really confused about it because he played.
I'm the same as you.
Pretty sure against Aston Villa, didn't he?
I'm the same as you, Joe, because I think. Do you know what it is? Like we've seen players react on social media, but you know what it is? I'm not going to hold back, because Bruno was very, very poor yesterday, unbelievably poor. He doesn't take criticism very well. It's probably because of the emotional character that he is, which we've seen in the highs and lows at his time in Newcastle. But if anybody's getting taken out of that midfield positioning, it's Bruno for me yesterday.
It should have been Bruno. Yeah, I love him. I think he's a great player, and I don't think that his performances recently are entirely down to him. I think it's a lot about the changing system that we're trying to implement. I don't think it's really suiting Bruno's game. If you think about how he played last season, he was the link between the defense and the attack, but he also, as I said before, created those triangles with Trippier and Miggy. And now it seems to be more Tonali's doing that. And it goes back to what I said before. It feels like they're playing almost the same game, but Tonali's doing a lot of what Bruno does well. And Bruno's almost stood there not really knowing what to do. He's kind of drifting a bit. He'll pick the ball up in the sort of mid-deep position somewhere in the halfway line, and the midfield isn't helping him out either. They're not playing those 1-2s. I feel like there's no chemistry at the moment between the likes of Joe Linton, Tonali, and Bruno, which is what you need when you're playing these three together. If you're going to play a 4-3-3, and I'm not telling Eddie Howe what to do here, but this is how I see it. You need to have probably one player that's in that defensive holding role to allow two other players to go further forward and support the attack. But it feels like we're almost playing three players flat along the middle, and occasionally one like a Tonali will sort of push forward a little bit, but then that's about it. There's no other support, and it just doesn't feel like it's working at the moment. And I think Eddie Howe will look at this and probably make some changes. My issue is back to the original point: will he drop Bruno to do that? Because as the way I see it, he currently is the piece that's not working at the moment. If he doesn't drop him, then he needs to find a way of bringing him into the game more, because he's not been as effective as he was last season. And I know that he can be as well, because he is a phenomenal player. He's a great player.
That's the thing, Joe, because we're in. Do you know what it is? It's a very fine line now of being overcritical of a player, but then just expecting more from a player as well. And I think that's what we're doing now. We're expecting more from Bruno because we know he can do it. We do. And do you know what it is? I don't go by this point where people say, well, look what happened last season. Look how far we came last season. Eddie Howe continuously mentions we take one game at a time. So this is exactly what we're going to do as a fan base right now as well. We're going to judge that last game, okay? And that's what we have to do. And Bruno was not good enough. And I don't think he's been good enough since the start of the season. I think there's been a few moments where he could be doing a hell of a lot better. Okay. That doesn't mean that he's a bad player and all of a sudden he's turning into the worst player ever.
He's great.
Far from it. He's a fantastic player. He really is. But maybe Eddie Howe has a tough decision to make to see what happens in that midfield. Just to play about with a couple of chess pieces and let's see what happens. Because like you said, if anybody's losing their position at the minute from that centre midfield position, it has to be Bruno if you're looking at performances.
Well, I think what does Eddie Howe want to do with Tonali? Because he's brought Tonali in, and I don't think for a second he's brought him in to replace Bruno or to do the same job that he's doing. So what is the original plan with Joelinton, Tonali, and Bruno? I know hindsight's brilliant and everything, but it would have been interesting to see what he would have done if Longstaff was fully fit from the start of the season, whether he would have looked to embed Tonali a little bit, a little bit incrementally in. It's a difficult to say because obviously we can't know. But I think this international break's come at a good time, to be honest, for Eddie to sit back and reassess. I mean, obviously we've got a couple of injuries as well. Hopefully nothing too serious, except for Joe Willock aside. But I think it's a good opportunity for Eddie Howe to look at our first 4 performances and say, all right, what can we do to get back to the levels that we were at?
Yeah.
Now, so the midfield is one thing, but then we have already spoken about this. The level of intensity across the entire side also seems to be lacking, and that's not just down to the midfield. Obviously, that's down to the whole team.
I put it in the WhatsApp group later on last night that we were so in a great place last season, at the start of last season, especially how we had a lot of shit houses in that team, and we loved the fact that we had that and they could wind players up. It seems like we're a bit of a soft touch this season. It seems like that's gone as well. So you can talk about the intensity and you can talk about that basically arrogance that we had as well at times last season. That seems to have gone as well. And it feels like now we're rocking up to some of these games and just thinking that we're going to give these teams a game. And I know we're only 4 games into the season and it's been a very difficult start. But we look like a completely different team to what we did last season.
We do. But then I know that these players aren't going to just lose that overnight. It's not like you get. I mean, if you watch episode 3 or 4, I can't remember which one, but it's when they talk about refurbishing the training ground, and it was about breeding that winning mentality. And I don't think for a second that you just lose that overnight like that. I think there is something psychologically that's going on with the team, but I don't think that it's one of those things where now they're just completely switched off and they're reverting back to how they used to be. That is completely down to Eddie Howe and the coaching staff to get that back to them. I don't know. It's a lack of confidence. Saying that we have done very well in pockets. I mean, I don't want to go back to the Villa game because it was 4 games ago. I get that, but we look like the side that we were. The last season, the Man City game. It's Man City. Very difficult to impose your style of player there. We came out 1-0 loss. Not the end of the world.
Yeah.
Liverpool. First off, we were class. First off, we managed. Okay, we weren't quite clinical enough, and that's a big criticism. But we weren't really clinical enough last season for large pockets either, but we still showed the same behaviors and same adventurous sort of like attitude that got us so many wins last season in the first half against Liverpool. It got us a goal and it got us a red card against the opposition. So in that respect, you can't really complain. Obviously, second half is when it completely went downhill, and yeah, we know what happened next. But this game was the first game in I think a while where from really the off, obviously first 5 minutes aside from the off, we always looked second best to the ball. We couldn't win a header with Joe Linton in midfield, which was really shocking, I thought. Every time Pope smashed it up, it felt like they were just towering over us and winning every first, second ball. That's the bit that I've actually not seen this season. The reason we've lost the last 3 games has almost been for completely different reasons. And, one of them being just against better opposition, one of them being probably some kind of psychological issue, and the third one just being a lack of intensity and not doing the things that we do best in controlling the game. So it's hard to say there's a consistent theme going on, which obviously makes things a little bit harder for Eddie Howe, but it also potentially means that it's an easier fix because there's not one deep-rooted thing that's an issue. I may be over-dissecting this, but
if you look at these fixtures as individual fixtures and compare them last season, they're very similar. When you look at results, very similar
as well.
You have to look at that, and I think what hurts the most is that yes, the all came in very quick succession. Whereas if we had have spread these across the season, you wouldn't be getting these sort of reactions from the fan base, because I know obviously later on in the game we did get a goal which Callum Wilson scored.
Absolute cool. No. I just want to say I am so glad he finally got his goal at the Amex, because he deserved one last season. So
yeah, we did get it. And do you know what it is? After I scored that goal, the intensity just slightly raised a little bit after I scored
I was sat there thinking, we could get this,
Yeah, but it's slightly raised.
Yeah,
but the match ends 3-1, and do you know what it is? And it's I don't know how Eddie is going to fix this. And like you said, that yes, we've got the international break, but I think he's got huge decisions to make, and it was really frustrating to see how easily the defense went to bits in the absence of Sven Botman. It was like we had changed every single defender on that field. And I know obviously the impacts had the impact, because obviously targets came in at left. Dan Burns had to shift into centre back position. Whether or not it would have been an easier fix just to chuck Lascelles in there alongside Fabian Shaw and keep Dan Burn at left back, we don't know. It just, Botman not being there, it looks like an absolute circus at the back at the minute.
This is probably a good time to talk about our summer strategy and how we spent money on players. There was a few things said in the WhatsApp chat and last night, and I think on Twitter as well, about why have we spent 60 million quid on reserve fullbacks, yet we haven't really upgraded the starting 11 positions that we need the most. Now, I would counter
to go in the starting 11.
Exactly. And one thing I will counter that by saying is that we haven't seen the full effects of being in 4 competitions yet, or at least 2 or 3 at the same time. So in that respect, once they start building up, then you'll start to see why we did it. But we needed. Probably
seems like we've invested for the future, doesn't it? Rather than right now.
We've seen heavily invested for the future, which is great, and get these players tied down early and get them improving and stuff. I understand that completely. But I mean, I said last night in the chat, why haven't we upgraded left back? And I think Scott said, well, yeah, we bought Lewis Hall. And I said, yeah, but that's not an upgrade if he's not playing. Like, that's great that we've got him, and it's great that we're developing him, and I'm glad that we've got him, but we're not seeing that impact on the pitch yet. So we need to see that, because at the end of the day, we're losing games because when we haven't got players that are able to come in straight from the off when we need them.
Yeah. It's
simple as that, really. And listen, I know it takes a bit of time. I know it takes time to embed some of these players in, but we've got young kids at fullbacks here, like Livramento and Hall, who I think Eddie Howe is probably not going to bring them in unless it's a cup game this season, unless things get really bad.
Mm-hmm.
I might be wrong, but
I agree with you.
The fact they start a target ahead of Hall says everything. And I wasn't surprised about that, to be honest, because he's obviously he's coached Target for a long time. Target's well ingrained in the group, and he knows what he can do. So he's tried and tested, so to speak. I understand that when the club buys a new player, everyone's like, just stick him in starting 11. He'll be absolutely class, no problem. That's obviously not how things work in reality, unless it's a really senior player who's like a Tonali. Who was even then Tonali was there because Longstaff was injured.
Probably.
He probably wouldn't have started otherwise. So
let's end it on a positive, mate. Okay.
Yes, let's do it.
Let's pick our Newcastle man of the match. Okay. And yes, I know everybody listening, everybody watching, we did lose the game 3-1, but let's find a positive from one of our players. I'll start off. I'm gonna go with Isak, because once again, we've seen in the last couple of games, like you mentioned earlier, he's feeding off scraps and he's still basically carving these sort of chances out of nothing, mate. And that's whether or not he's having a chance himself or he's bringing somebody else into play. We saw it at the start of the game. We saw it when he then dropped onto the left-hand side when Callum Wilson was brought on to go up top as well. He looked quite dangerous on that left-hand side, which we've seen a few times. What about you?
No, I would agree. It's very difficult. I would say there's probably some shouts for Miggy because of what he was doing in the first half. And Gordon as well, even though he did miss quite a few chances. I don't know if you remember, there was one chance where it fell to him quite nicely and he should have put that away. And it goes back to that old criticism that we've had of him, that he's great and everything but his finishing. So Gordon did quite well. I'm trying to think of who else really made an impact. Obviously, Wilson scored, so I'd probably give it to him.
Give it a Wilson.
Give it a Wilson. I mean, he did more than the rest of them. Yeah, it's hard. I thought the whole back four really struggled.
Yeah.
Although
every single one of them.
Obviously, Pope had a bit of a howler. Yeah, it's got to be Isak. I was surprised when Wilson came on and Isak sort of started playing on the left hand side more, because I thought he might play them more as a two. But obviously that didn't happen. But then Isak looked really dangerous. To be fair, when he started making those runs, and I thought, oh, actually, this is a new avenue that we can explore about getting in behind the defenders, because obviously we know he can do that. See Everton last season, but yeah, it didn't quite work out. So I would say Isak. And again, he was feeding on scraps for so much of that game.
Yeah. There's going to be changes, though, isn't it? Going to be changes.
Well, I hope so. I mean, I know that Eddie Howe is he's loyal to an extent that he likes a system and he wants to look at how he can improve the players in that system before he takes them out. But how loyal he's been to the likes of Bruno and that, I really struggle to see him leaving the side. But then, how long is he going to go on for before big drastic changes need to be made?
Before I wrap this up, just what I do want to show on screen there, I will talk people through it that are listening on the audio as well, is that at the very start of the season, Sky Sports issued this, which was a strength of schedule, which basically gave fans a breakdown. Okay, and that was for every team's strength of schedule at the start of the season. Okay, Newcastle, obviously, we already knew this, but they had the worst possible start out of everybody in the 20 team league. So it's no real shock, Joe, that we'll find ourselves in this position. Is a really that yes, we've got one win, but also have 3 defeats as well, because those defeats came against Man City, Liverpool, and Brighton, who are all 3 good sides. On the flip side of that, if you look at the very bottom of that table, Chelsea are there, and Chelsea were predicted to have the easiest starting fixtures, and I think they tallied it over 5 games. Chelsea aren't doing too good. So
they're shocking, man. They're shocking.
So pick the bones of that, because yes, we're in the position, but then on the flip side, you can look at Chelsea and go,
oh no, absolutely, of course, right, yeah. So I read that this time last year, I think we had 4 points from these same fixtures, and now we have 3 this time round. It's minging that we've had them all one after the other. I will say, though, and I said this at the very start, that I'm glad we're getting these games out the way, these more difficult fixtures out the way, before we hit the Champions League and we start having to rotate every other week, just to give some tired legs a break. So whilst it has been absolutely minging, and it's not psychological, it's not great viewing to see us so far down the table so early. They are good sides that we've played, and yes, we should be doing more because we are capable of more, but it's not the end of the world. We couldn't win we couldn't buy a win after Forest's first game of the season last season. We won against them, and I think we went on a streak of like 7 draws. We almost lost against Wolves away if it wasn't for us Alan maximum wonder strike at the end. We had a really difficult start, and then we went on this absolute like insane, glorious streak of winning from October to November up until the World Cup. So, tides can turn pretty quickly. And we've seen it before. We started slow last season. We're starting slow this season. But like you say, we're getting these fixtures out of the way. They're very difficult. And I think when you look at what the fixtures that we've got from now until, well, I think about December time, they're really favourable. And yes, we'll have the Champions League in there. We'll have the Carabao Cup in there, blah, blah, blah. But, we'll be fine. We'll be fine. It's a hard start. It's a slow start. We're embedding new players in. It's not great. I'm not saying it's fine. It's la-di-da. Like, who cares? But let's put things in a bit of perspective. It's not quite the house on fire that it may look on the surface.
Yeah. So we're sticking by the lads. We're sticking by the coach.
Of course we are, man.
We are just going to crack on. Put those 3 miserable defeats behind with. Then let's obviously, like you said, great time for the international break. Just regroup and start again. It's Brentford the next game, I believe.
It is.
So we'll just crack on and see what happens after that Brentford game. Because if we get 3 points against Brentford, everything will look fine. If we lose against Brentford, then this is when we're going to probably be having a different conversation.
Let's not even entertain that. Let's not even entertain that, man. We'll be fine.
Thanks everybody who has watched this one. Thanks all those that are listening back on the audio as well. If you're listening on the audio, just give us a 5-star rating. If you have enjoyed this, it helps us out massively, and it does help us climb up the charts. Joe, we were actually in the top 50 sports podcasts in the UK last week. So all good news for that one.
Great to hear.
If you are watching the video as well, just like the video, become a subscriber. It helps us out massively too. I think we're close to around about 10,500 at the minute as well. If you do want extra content and early access, you can become a member. It is just $2.99 a month to do that. Like I said, you get early access to videos, you get extra videos as well. You also get access to the Telegram group as well as the Discord community as well. Plenty of more stuff from ourselves coming up. I will be back with the lads on Monday night for the Always Smiling Faces podcast. Obviously, there will be no match previews this week, but I'm sure we can think of some more things to do to talk about all things Newcastle United. Thanks for watching, everybody. See you later.